Thank you for joining us for devotion time. And we're still in John chapter 18, and Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and now they've come to arrest him. And you might recall from back in John chapter 13, it was like verse 38, that Simon Peter had told Jesus that he would even die for him. And Jesus said, "You think you'll die for me, but you'll actually deny that you know me 3 times before the rooster crows." And so we're going to deal with who Peter thought he was and who Peter really was, and apply that to ourselves. We're not as strong as we think we are, and sometimes our failure to do what we think we're capable of doing surprises us. And I think it really surprised Peter in this particular instance. John chapter 18, starting with verse 15. Simon Peter was following Jesus, and so was another disciple. That's John. He always refers to himself in third person. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. Now this high priest is Annas, who the Jews recognized as high priest. The other was his son-in-law Caiaphas, that the Romans assigned to be high priest. So Jesus goes to Annas first, and then Annas sends him to Caiaphas. We're still in the courtyard of Annas. Peter was standing at the door outside, so the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went and spoke to the doorkeeper and brought Peter in. Then the slave girl, who kept the door, said to Peter, "You're not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" And he said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the officers were standing there, having made a charcoal fire, for it was cold, and they were warming themselves, and Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. Now I want to skip down to verse 24. Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, "You're not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, being a relative of the one whose ear Peter cut off, you talk about wanting to deny, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" And then Peter denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. And it says in another one of the Gospels that when that happened, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. I wonder what that look was. Maybe a combination of "I told you so" and "hang in there, Peter, it'll get better." I don't know for sure. But later in Acts chapter 2, Peter preached the sermon of Pentecost, and these very guys had to have been there. On the day of Pentecost, the Jewish leadership being in Jerusalem, and Peter said, "This Jesus whom you crucified, God has made him both Lord and Christ, and we're witnesses of it." What was the difference? The Holy Spirit was sent. 2 Timothy 1:7 is such an important verse for Christians. We have not received the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. So Peter had courage that he didn't have before, and he had to humble himself and depend upon the Holy Spirit to give him that courage. You get to Ephesians chapter 6, and you have the Apostle Paul telling us we wrestle against principalities and powers, and put on your armor. And then he says, put it on praying. And then he says, pray for me, that I might make known the mystery of the gospel with boldness. In other words, Paul's saying, I can't do this without the Holy Spirit of power and love and a sound mind. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful day there.